Thanks so much for your company. I am Pius Kojobaka. This evening, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has significantly reduced the policy rate to 25% from 28%. Now, Governor of the Bank of Ghana assured that the committee remains committed to the price stability mandate while creating conditions for inclusive and sustainable growth. Addressing a press conference, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Johnson Isiema, pointed out that there are upside risks to inflation outlook, which could include potential supply chain challenges and emanating from the global trade tensions and upward adjustments in tariffs.
The July forecast also shows that headline inflation is expected to decline further in the third quarter of 2025 and trend within the medium-term target of 8 plus or minus 2% by the end of 2025, earlier than initial projections. However, there are upside risks to the inflation outlook, which include potential supply chain challenges emanating from the global trade tensions and upward adjustment in utility tariffs. These notwithstanding, the impact of these risks on inflation are expected to be offset by appropriately tight monetary policy stance and continued fiscal consolidation. Given these considerations, the MPC, by a majority decision, voted to lower the monetary policy rate by 300 basis points to 25.0%. And looking ahead, the committee will continue to assess incoming data and likely reduce the policy rate further should the disinflation trend continue. The committee remains committed to the price stability mandate while creating conditions for inclusive and sustainable growth.
All right, let's bring in my colleague, George Yafe, who just returned from the Bank of Ghana following that significant announcement from the press conference. George, thank you so much for joining us on Business Live. First off, what are some of the reasons given for the significant reduction we are seeing?
And a bit of background, because this is the rate or the policy rate. This is the rate at which the central bank lend to the commercial banks when it comes to overnight lending. And basically, it is seen as a policy tool if they want to influence cost of credit going forward. It also give the market some signal in terms of what we should be expecting going forward. Now, this 300 basis point cut or cut in the rate, it might be the biggest in a long while that we've seen, even though some feel that they could have done better by going down further. Why are they making this argument? If you look at the Treasury bills rate, the rate at which government is borrowing on the market, I think it's gone down to almost about 10%. If you look at the rate at which the Bank of Ghana itself, through its open market operations, lending to some of the commercial banks as well, it has dropped significantly within the teens. Therefore, people were looking forward for some significant cut in the policy rate so that we see some sort of evenness in all these instruments on the market. And that's why some journalists were even asking during this press conference that couldn't they have gone further? But you heard the governor there trying to explain that it is more of a cautionary approach in trying to cut this rate down, because you are not only just influencing the cost of credit, but also you want to use this policy rate as a machine, if I can use that expression, to also check inflation. And you realize that you've seen some subtle pressure on the exchange rate. You're also expecting that fuel prices issues and also some levies and charges that was actually announced in the mid-year budget could come into force. And so rather go through the cautionary approach in cutting the rate by some 3%, observe the market, and then see whether things are okay, and then maybe go again. Even though indications are more right that we could see inflation come down again for the month of July, there are concerns about what will happen in August, and that is just more of a brief background to these issues. So this is what the governor was saying, that this should form as a background for all of us to appreciate why they went down by this margin.
And I can imagine the excitement on the faces of businesses, but what more issues came up at that press conference?
It depends on who you're talking to, but there were some who are saying that if T-bills is around 10% rate, could they have also come within the 18th range or 17th range or even 15 range so that we could see some significant drop in terms of the cost of credit as well? But again, you realize that the governor spoke about the fact that they are monitoring the market and they would act as and when it matters. There was also concerns about whether there is enough dollars on the market. And the governor's response was that, well, when it comes to the Bank of Ghana, they do have the required dollars. There have been some issues on the market that they are trying to correct. That is why we have seen that lag period. Right. Sometimes the delay has not got to do with the fact that nothing was there. Some of the commercial banks were actually trying to scrutinize these requests in terms of documentations. And that is why we saw this. There was also a question about whether the Bank of Ghana is pegging the rate at around, more of trying to manage the rate. His response was that, no, they are still looking at the free market more of approach that depending on demand and supply, they would actually release some of these currencies onto the market to manage the float. There was also questions about basically the fact that gold prices wouldn't continue rising on the international market. Right. There have been concerns about cocoa prices as well. His response about the gold prices was that within the next month as well, they will be coming out with a module to kind of hedge the gold prices to mitigate the expected shocks, because you realize that one of the reasons why our reserves have gone up significantly and our city is stabilizing is what we are getting from these commodities. And if we don't find a mechanism to try and hedge a little bit, but there might be a problem.
Thank you very much, George. And thankfully, we do have an economist on the Zoom, I'm told, to have this great conversation. Macroeconomic Research Manager at GCB Bank PLC, Courage Buti. Thank you so much, Courage, for making time to join us here on Business Live. Now, we are learning the MPC attributed the rate cut to the continued decline in headline inflation and improvement in the macroeconomic environment, hence the 300 basis points, which George confirmed the biggest in the history of the Bank of Ghana. Your thoughts?
Well, actually, the biggest I remember happened in 2001, I think 500 basis points from 32% to 27%. But at the time, we had not started the current monetary policy regime, that is the inflation targeting. Maybe just by way of context, it is expected there will be a major rate cut. I was looking at something between 300 and 500 basis points, given where inflation rate is one, where the real monetary policy rate is, and currently it looks like Ghana has the highest real monetary policy rate up until this decision globally from the number of central banks I have looked at. We have also seen that central bank, as of yesterday, in fact, as of 28, was raising or more at just around 10%, thereabout, really. And if the monetary policy rate is that guidance rate that used to guide the market, and more purposes liquidity or inject liquidity when need be, ideally, they are supposed to be doing the OMO around the policy rate corridor. So just around the policy rate, really. We are seeing a very major disparity now, and that is what gave people the impetus to say, maybe you could have rate cuts of even up to 1,000 basis points and all that, because you tend to do OMO at a much lower rate or, mop up at a much lower rate when you want to encourage liquidity in the market. Currently, there is liquidity and Bank of Ghana needs to mop up, and they are doing that at a very low rate. So there is a bit of mismatch there, but I understand why it is so. Central banks do not move to rattle the market, and so they will adopt a gradualist approach. Remember, he made a profound statement that they will still keep the policy rate tight to prevent a spillover into FX and, of course, recurrence in inflation and all that. So it would be a gradual approach towards maybe at the level they are comfortable with. So expect that in September, there will be another probably major decision, probably November, another major, and policy rate could end the year around 22, 20 thereabout from the trajectory we are going.
Interesting.
I think July inflation will go down, and the outlook for inflation for the remainder of the year is quite favorable, even if there are some factors to look up. I think it's also largely favorable, and we just have to sustain it. So I see more room for policy rate go down, but in this gradualist approach, the way they have adopted now.
Interesting verdict you have there. But prior to this announcement, there were calls on the BoG to tread cautiously over a push for a huge cut in the policy rate, arguing current economic data does not support the huge cut in the policy rate. Now you are predicting we are likely to foresee more cuts subsequently. What's going to be the impact of this on inflation?
Well, so like I said, there is so much liquidity in the system, and they are still mopping up. But you see, and that is where Bank of Ghana need to gradually get to. There was an opening on the market when T-bill rate fell sharply. Banks were doing a lot of OMO, and that is why there were shortfalls at the T-bill auctions. At this moment, they have decided to bring down rates at the OMO and both T-bill and OMO. So you realize that the TB and OMO rates are much aligned. Now, banks are indifferent between going T-bill and doing OMO. And so you would have to find a way of luring them if you have to mop up. But this is Bank of Ghana really saying one very important thing. We want the real sector to grow. You saw the 24-hour plus economy and the direction is going. You realize that it is focused on SMEs and it is focused on cheaper funding. In fact, the target lending rate they are looking at is 12%. So what they are doing, the governor had said from the beginning he wants to bring lending rate to 10%, is to align the market so that credit goes to productive sectors. If money is not in circulation without productivity, there is no inflation. So they are trying to encourage and channel liquidity towards the productive sectors to try to drive growth and productivity. And I think that is important. And I think he actually alluded to that in his statement. So that is the hope. And then in the meantime, we are still doing significant mop-up and liquidity from the OMO market to try to curtail inflation. A major driver of inflation and the disinflation we have seen so far has been that government has remained uncharacteristically very disciplined. And we've seen how that impacted exchange rate, how that is impacting inflation and all the other macros. So to the extent the fiscal handle, the check is still in place, commitment controls are in place and all that. And that also means that the exchange rate dynamics are also predictable and in place. We shouldn't have too much shocks to inflation, at least from the demand side.
All right.
If there will be any shocks, it will be from the supply side of things, which we do not have control over immediately. And government policy to direct flows to the, if you like, loan market should be the way to go. And he said it quite clearly that they are by this trying to guide, lending into the real sectors of the economy. So I think those are the ways we can cure inflationary consequences going forward.
All right. Ultimately, Mr. Buti, what will be the significant impact by way of this reduction to cost of borrowing for businesses and households?
We are seeing the trend. In fact, three major variables influence the GR. The policy rate is one, T-bill rate is another, and then I think there is one other rate, which I don't really recall now, and of course cash in vote and a few others. Three of those variables have behaved. In fact, the last one I was trying to recall is interbank rate. All of those are coming down quite sharply. So the expectation is that lending rate will come down. And I told you what the governor said his intent is to bring lending rates to 10% by the end of his tenure, really. And so if policy rate, which is an influencing factor, will come down, we expect it to come down further. If T-bill is around 10% and if we can sustain it there, and if the interbank lending rate would also come down, cash in vote, I think, is fixed at 2% also. If you put those variables together, we should see drastic declines in the GR, which is the benchmark. And then, of course, lending rate to respond accordingly. So that is the expectation, and that is how they intend to stimulate growth without necessarily encouraging direct government expenditure into growth enhancing or real sector. Create the environment for private sector to invest, borrow at a lower cost and invest. You produce more goods, you reduce inflation, and you create jobs. I think that is what I can read from everything this government is trying to put together.
Very well. Thank you so much, Macroeconomic Research Manager, GCB Bank PLC, Courage Oti. I truly appreciate your time speaking to me here on Business Life on the back of the policy rate cut. Now, the International Monetary Fund has reiterated the critical need for Ghana and other sub-Saharan African countries to prioritize the establishment of an operational independent central bank. Speaking at the World Economic Outlook update in the United States, the IMF chief economist Pierre Oliver emphasized that such independence is essential for ensuring price and economic stability.
Restoring stability in trade policy is essential to reduce policy uncertainty. We urge all parties to settle trade disputes and agree on clear and predictable frameworks. Collective efforts should be made to restore and improve the global trading system. The need for predictable and stable rules extend to other areas of policymaking. It is important to reaffirm and preserve the principle of central bank independence. The evidence is overwhelming that independent central banks with a narrow mandate to pursue price and economic stability are essential to anchoring inflation expectations. That central banks around the world achieved a successful soft landing despite the recent surge in inflation.
You're still watching Business Life. We have the Joy Business Van after this break. Welcome back to Business Life. Let's now take the Joy Business Van. Food is essential for survival, yet millions face empty plates daily. Modern farming solutions like climate-smart seeds, advanced equipment, and skilled labor hold the key to transforming food systems. Legacy Crop Improvement Center, based in the Eastern region, is on a mission to boost food security by producing and distributing high-quality, climate-resilient seeds. Could this be the turning point in the fight against hunger? We find out on the Joy Business Van.
From a bold idea in 2016 to a national agricultural asset in 2025, Amos Rutherford Azinu, founder of Legacy Crop Improvement Center, is planting more than seeds. He's sowing a future of food security, farmer empowerment, and agricultural excellence.
This is our one of our seed foundation farm. We do a lot of research in this farm here. So currently we have the cowpea, the new cowpea that we are breeding, and the maize variety that we are crossing. So basically this farm was created 10 years ago for research purpose, where we identify a good crop and we do the trial year. Those that we have to cross like maize, hybrid maize, we cross both male and female to determine the hybrid one, which is acceptable to the market. Then we do other trial before we carry out the commercialization to the farm. So this farm is actually made for research purpose, and currently we have the cowpea and the maize variety that we are testing for commercialization.
We are at Otareso in the Eastern region, where Legacy Crop Improvement Center is located. There, Amos is pioneering a new era in hybrid seed production with cutting-edge facilities and bold innovation. Central to this success is the role of research in developing climate-resilient seeds that can withstand the growing challenges of a changing environment.
Oh, you know, in life of crop, it's like a marriage between a man and a woman. So every crop has both male and female. So we have to identify which male will be good for which female. It's like a beauty pageant. So when you are married, you are looking for a woman, you go and look for some characters that are very beautiful. So we do the same thing. But in this case, the plant don't select their partners. We do the selection for them. So because we know what we are looking for the market. So we do that and we cross them. When they give birth, then we try to see whether their children carry the kind of desired trait that we are looking for.
Amos highlights some challenges encountered on the Seed Foundation farm.
Number one challenge that we face here is erosion because of the slope nature of the field. So every year we have to get the backhoe machines to make sure we put the land in a good shape to avoid erosion of the topsoil, which is the good organic matter that we need for our activities. So our bigger challenge here is erosion, but as you see, we are able to control it by make sure constantly we are creating the gutters and keeping the farm in shape. After this seed, we are going to take it to the lab. We are going to look for some characters, the purity and everything before. Then, if it's good, then we started the processing for commercialization.
So how are the seeds faring on the market?
think that the maize has the most market present, because even if you take us our people, about 90% of the household this morning we may have consumed maize related products. So maize is number one. But what is catching up these days is a cowpea seed. You know, normally the boys call it gobe. So formerly the farmers don't buy that seed for planting, but these days you see a lot of farmers calling you, I want to plant this, I want to plant this. So that market is also shooting up, but the maize is still leading in terms of the market.
Legacy Crop Improvement Center works closely with farmers and other relevant stakeholders to ensure that the seeds developed are well adapted to local conditions and meet the practical needs of those on the front lines of agriculture.
Our product that we develop here, the farmers are the ones that select the product. We have a lot of product in the pipeline through our research. So every year we do what we call a stakeholder meeting. We invite them to our farms, then they come and select. Then they will have to go to that process of registration also to make sure these varieties are in. We also call our agri-extension officers and the directors, and they also come and give us the feedback the farmers are giving on the product, so that inform our breeding objective or research objective, what we should do next from there. So we work in hand with every stakeholder along the seed value chain.
The seeds are also bred to be pest resistant, significantly reducing farmers' reliance on chemical pesticides and promoting safer, more sustainable farming practices.
We are trying to reduce the use of chemicals in the farmers. That's why these days we are looking at the disease-resistant, pest-resistant varieties, so that farmers don't end up buying a lot of chemicals. It's not only affecting the environment, it's also affecting the health of those farmers. Because if they indiscriminately use it, then it's actually... So if we can get a new variety of maize that is worm resistant, or cowpea that is resistant to major pests and diseases, that's going to be a plus and a good news for farmers, so that the farmers don't spend a lot of money buying chemicals and at the end of the day be exposed to those chemicals that cause a lot of cancer and other disease to them.
Next time, we'll learn more about the seed certification process and how Legacy Crop Improvement Center is turned into vegetable seed production.
Basically to talk about chili, tomatoes, and okra in Ghana. Because when you look at the vegetable industry, you realize that it's actually importation. It's zero. We don't do local production here. So we have gone to agreement with the World Vegetable Center. They are giving us some lines, the seed to do a local trial. Once those varieties survive here, we can now start the multiplication of those varieties. So also, it's also going to make these seeds available in... The cost will be more lower than what we used to import now. So that's one of the good news we are bringing to the system. We are also hoping to scale up whatever we do in terms of our maize seed production by expanding our facility to make sure we deliver high quality seed to farmers in a few years to come.